Welcome everyone to our May Safety Update webinar from Safety Action. So I'm Gary Rowe and Andrea Rose joining me as a co-host today. Good morning, Andrea.
Good morning, Gary.
Yeah, thank you. And before we kick off with what we're going to cover today, we'll also introduce Tracy Bailey, a new member of our team. So welcome, Tracy. You don't need to answer, but lovely to have you on board. Thanks for all your great help. We've got quite a busy little webinar this morning, so we'd like to share with you quite a bit of, I think, interesting and new information, measuring safety performance, electrical safety changes, correct wearing of respirators enforced, an interesting case Andrea will take us through. I like this one. Harsh tone is not necessarily bullying, and Andrea will explain that to us as well shortly. And a scheduler in a logistics business, trucking business, has been convicted of recklessness, and he's now only one of 4 people affected, and the amendments to the Victorian incident notifications. So that's what we're going to cover today. But before we do that, I usually like a little question. And they're a little bit different today. They're not pure technical questions. There's a recent case, and it interests me that what they concluded. So, cannot changing a flat battery on a ride-on mower provide grounds for alleged negligence? We'll come back to this at the end of the session, but it might surprise you what the courts have come up with in relation to that. And the second question, can we give a belated warning for failure to follow safety procedures? So some companies have informal and formal warnings for people to follow their safety rules. And many companies might say, oh, you get 3 warnings before we take more serious disciplinary action, for example. So here's the question. What if the manager's away and not available to give that warning, but comes back a month later? Is that too late? Are you allowed to do that? So we'll come back to both of those questions. So let's kick off with our first topic. There's a new international standard, ISO 45004. This replaces the very old Australian standard, 1885, which has now recently been withdrawn from sale in Australia, but it dates back to 1976. Can you believe that, Andrea? 1976. And of course, we all know that traditionally businesses have primarily measured safety performance on the LTI rate. Lost time injury rate is what most board members and executives know. But of more recent years, the term TRIFR has come into play, which is total recordable injuries, which picks up lost time injuries, medical treatment injuries, and I think anyone who can't perform their normal job, Andrea. So, if they've got restricted tasks or something. So that's what TRIFR is. Increasingly we're seeing TRIFR rate referred to as the key measure. And so TRIFR, along with LTI rate, what we call lag indicators. And so the new international standard on measuring safety performance has moved from just the lag indicators to actually indicate things like lead indicators. And they've outline things like setting OHS objectives and targets is one measure of, if you like, positive safety performance, that all hazards are reported and fixed promptly, that safety inspections are completed to an agreed schedule, maintaining an up-to-date key risks register, managers doing regular safety walks. So this is nice. And I think many good managers have been doing this for many years, but it's now actually, if you like, listed in the new international standard as a potpourri of, it's not prescriptive standard like most ISO standards. They're very high level, but they actually give some indication of the things that businesses could be thinking about. Things like safety training conducted. And of course, that could be open-ended, and we don't know whether we've done too much, too little, or somewhere in between. Having a positive safety culture, and that's typically measured by doing a safety climate survey, and having a high percentage of positive responses to your questions is what we're looking for. And obviously completion of the safety business plan within the business. Everyone writes up what they're going to do for the year, but they don't always do it. And we had good reason. Remember, we had that problem early in the year, so we didn't do it. So you can always have excuses for not completing your safety business plan. We recommend once the executive team and or board have signed off on that, we as safety professionals, we should be committed to implementing and fulfilling every element of that safety business plan. And not just come up with, I got busy or I was sick that month, and so these things didn't happen. Every business has people away and other things come up. We've got to make sure we recapture things that fall behind. So that's the essence of the standard.
So Gary, it's really great to see this finally a new standard, and at Safety Action we've been using these lead indicators in our performance benchmarking surveys for many years, over 10 years I think.
Yes.
And something that I really did like is in particular the actually fixing the hazards being a critical measure.
Yes.
And as you might recall, many years ago at Ballarat, I did my thesis on that very topic of what activities actually, is there any evidence of any activities that are proven to have a safety benefit, as in which activities can you do that actually might reduce the injuries or lag indicators?
Yes.
And
Yep.
the one activity that was found to reduce injuries was actually conducting audits or inspections, but more importantly, actually tracking the actions until they were resolved. And that activity was found to relate to reduced injuries.
Yeah, good point, Sandra, and thanks for sharing what you did with your dissertation up at the Ballarat University, doing your postgrad in safety management, as I recall. And so the next slide, I just wanted to show we have a template, a very short, sharp template, which we'd call for the board safety report. And we think part A should be annual safety report, the safety vision and strategy signed off by the board and or exec. The key risk exposures, e.g. your key risk register, is reviewed. The corporate safety business plan is reviewed, and safety systems and performance. And part B, monthly, any significant incidents by exception, emerging risks by exception, and safety performance. I think you'll notice, Andrew, what we now do is put the lead indicators first. We don't take away the lag indicators, we just put them second. So we know most executives still know LTI rate and TRIFR rate, and that's probably how they're going to continue to measure performance between business operations and factories and sites, but certainly in the short term. But what we want to do is put the lead indicators first to get them used to it, so they continually start to feel more comfortable with the not only what the lead indicators are, but as you pointed out, Andrea, which ones are more effective and they're actually going to make a difference in the business. So if anyone's interested in our template, as shown there on screen, you've only got to contact us and we'll email that out to you if that's of help. And the other one is most of our readers and listeners know, we have been doing annual benchmarking safety performance survey for most of our clients and readers and listeners. The last year's report, if you haven't got it, but you're interested in having a look at it, Dr. Weber of our team led the analysis and the write-up and preparation of this report, which I think is excellent. And along the lines of what Andrew was saying about fixing hazards, Dr. Weber's pointed out a number of other safety activities, which by Steve's analysis shows are more effective than other things that you should be doing in your business to improve safety performance. So if you're interested in that, call or email us and we'll shoot that out to you. And I think later this year, we hope to kick off with our next benchmarking survey, and we'll keep you posted on the timing of that. So Andrea, I think you were going to tell us there was two key things happening. I think one was WA WorkSafe have updated what's a notifiable electric shock and also some Northern Territory electrical changes. Do you want to just take us through those briefly?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. And just for those of you watching the webinar, Gary posed the questions earlier. I've actually put those questions in the Q&A section of the Teams. So if you wanted to have a go, sharing your opinion or yes or no for those questions, you can do that there in the Q&A. And yeah, let me tell you about these changes. So what we know is, in all states of Australia, electric shock is in the definitions of a notifiable incident, to notify the WorkSafe Authority. And so it's been very helpful that WorkSafe WA have clarified a couple of things that are not notifiable electric shocks. The first being a static shock. That, we frequently feel those.
And Andrea, it's worthwhile noting there, static electricity can have very high voltage, like thousands of volts, but hopefully and presumably no very low current. So it's still a very noticeable jolt and might actually be painful to somebody. But if it's known to be static electricity, as you point out, is one of those that's not notifiable.
Yeah, and we certainly know, from recent alerts, static electricity being very important to control around flammable vapors, because it can still cause a fire when transferring flammable liquids. The shock is not notifiable if there is extra low voltage, being less than 50 volts AC or less than 120 volts DC. And also to clarify that being shocked by a defibrillator, for emergency purposes is not notifiable, as in the electric shock for electric shock.
Andrea, you and I were speaking earlier. We would have thought we didn't need that clarification. However,
Indeed.
It's nice that they've said, hey, look, if this is for to save your life, you don't need to tell us about the electric shock, but you might want to tell us about the other accident or what brought about your injury, or it might be just a heart attack. So, but it's nice that WorkSafe WA have clarified that, and I think we can use those clarifications, I think, nationwide, don't you think, Andrea?
Yeah, I would agree. And, obviously, WorkSafe WA might have been getting a bit too much unnecessary paperwork, so they've made that clarification for us. So that's great. Now, in New South Wales, the new...
Northern Territory, sorry.
My apologies. Northern Territory, the new Electrical Safety Act commences on the 1st of July this year. And they have made some significant changes in this act. Firstly, it's probably a bit of an obvious one that we already knew. Businesses need to use competent people to test electrical safety switches. So presumably like those RCD tests that's recommended, and also to test electrical equipment. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they need to be a licensed electrician. For some of those tests, it will be a competent person that's done a training course to do that activity. And now, I think this is a good one, that specifically double adapters and piggybacking plugs have been banned in manufacturing. I think in all workplaces, this is a good practice, especially the piggybacking of the plugs. We don't recommend you do that at home or anywhere. Is that right, Gary?
Correct. For many years, Andrea, we, in our safety audits for our clients, we have picked up any of those double adapters or piggybacking of electrical plugs and advised the clients in our reports.
Yeah, and of course, in our office, we've long held the belief that, we just get the electrician to put a new outlet in if we don't have enough outlets. And they make sure that the switchboard or the system is not overloaded by the number of outlets. So your licensed electrician knows what to do there. As another very specific requirement is before entering a roof space, the electricity must be isolated. So whether it's necessary or not, that's now going to be the law in Northern Territory from 1st of July. Businesses must mark the zones around battery systems. So visually identifying the zone around the system and then ensuring there's no combustible material in that zone. Some of these requirements appear to have come into place due to, the increase of use of solar and battery storage systems, which we know they can get hot, especially these lithium-ion batteries. They can get hot, and if compromised, they could catch fire. Homeowners will be required to install safety switches, so the RCD switches in the switchboard of their homes from starting in July 2026. Most newer homes already have those, and if you've had an electrician do work, they will most of us already have those, but if they don't, they'll be required to install those.
So, Andrea, I understand that requirement is now going retrospective, because we know all new homes around Australia and new facilities have had this safety switches for all new circuits for a number of years. I believe they're giving 2 years notice. If your home hasn't got it, you're going to have to go back and do that retrospectively. But I just saw a question for you, Andrea, back on marking around battery systems. Somebody asked,
Carol,
how far out from the battery do you have to mark that zone?
No,
do you know?
I hadn't. We'll go back and we will let you know, Carol. But the answer is, in Victoria, we don't yet have a similar requirement. However, it's certainly recommended at least to have a clearance zone around any storage batteries and keeping combustible materials away, because we know if the battery is compromised or if they do overheat, there could be a risk of catching fire to any combustibles in the area. My just initial thoughts would be at least 1 metre, but we will get back to you on what the actual distance is in Northern Territory, where it's the law. So good question. The law also includes additional requirements for solar, so solar panels installed on the roof and the related systems, and electric vehicle charge points. I think more regulations likely to come in place in the rest of Australia. At the moment, it's sort of inconsistently regulated by local council requirements, where some areas you require a permit to install a new electric vehicle charger, whereas others you don't. That's an area of interest to me. Let me know if you've got more questions about installing electric vehicle chargers. But if it's in your home, my recommendation is to have it outside and not to leave something on charge overnight while you're sleeping, and also recommending installing smoke and heat detectors in the charging area, so that at least if there was a fire, you and your family will be alerted and be able to evacuate in time. And it's also important to note that these requirements do extend to volunteer organisations. So community groups and not-for-profits also need to comply with the new Electrical Safety Act. So if you're in Northern Territory, you'll need to be across these requirements, and no doubt your electricians will be.
Thanks, Andrea. And if I may say to everyone, while these are Northern Territory, their new Electrical Safety Act, I think every one of these is just good practice, that I think everyone should be looking to follow. For example, isolating the power before entry into the roof space seems eminently sensible, given a number of fatalities have occurred when people have accidentally made contact with live wires up in the roof space. So as one example. So I think all of these would be just good for everyone to follow nationwide. And if they don't become law, I think they do represent best practice. So thanks for that, Andrea.
Great. Thanks, Gary. And now, secondly, I'll just be quick on this one, because I know we had a lot to talk about in this month's webinar. So just one to let you know, the Fair Work Commission has recently enforced the rules applied by a business, which was TasWater. TasWater had instructions that workers need to wear when they're wearing the respirators, that there was a clean face policy, which is, of course, sensible, because we know that if you need a respirator to protect you from vapors or particles, if the worker is not clean shaven, it actually creates gaps around the seal. The respirator does not seal properly, and the worker is not getting the intended protection from the respirator. If they're exposed to, toxic chemicals, obviously the seal of the face mask is absolutely critical. And so the Fair Work Commission has, sided with TasWater and confirmed that they are rightfully allowed to enforce that policy, that the workers must be clean shaven for wearing respirators. What they didn't comment. Sorry, Gary.
I was going to say, probably an important point here is that TasWater adequately demonstrated to the Fair Work Commission the highly toxic chemicals that are sometimes involved and the circumstances. So the Fair Work Commission supported this clean face policy fairly strongly, but the union involved, the CEPU, did not bring forward in this case alternate reasonably practical PPE that they could have had. For example, air supplied helmets, you and I know, are far more comfortable, not as hot, but may or may not be appropriate for those circumstances. But because that information was not brought forward, the Commission simply said, no, the employer has the legal right to enforce the clean shaven face, for good fit of the respirators. So thanks for that, Andrea. So were you going to add something else to that?
No, I think that's great, Gary. And I was just going to mention the air supplied helmets. Yeah, it can add comfort and can also allow, I guess, better flexibility for some of your workers that may have special needs, to, religious needs, for example, to not be clean shaven. You can still actually accommodate for those workers and have them still performing that same work in a safe way.
Yeah, thanks for that, Andrea. So the next one was interesting to me as I saw the headline, harsh tone, not necessarily bullying. And of course, that always attracts me. So there have been two recent Fair Work Commission cases, one in March and one in April, where in both cases the workers complained about their supervisor and believed that they were being bullied. The allegations essentially were that the supervisor was speaking bluntly and with a harsh tone to them. The supervisor directed repeated training that they didn't want or feel they needed. That they were being watched too closely, and moved the worker to a different department in one case, and narrowed the role of one of the workers. And they believe this was the evidence of bullying. So what did the Commission find? Number one, which I think was in both cases, Andrea, was the Fair Work Commission concluded the workers involved in these cases, not in all cases, in these two cases, were ultra sensitive to almost any feedback they got from their supervisor or from management. So this seemed to be fairly clear. These people are very, very sensitive. So I don't think they liked any of the feedback. They concluded that tone and context is vital, but the Commission found it difficult to objectively measure this retrospectively because both parties gave their own story of what they said and how they said it. So the Commission can only go on the facts, objective facts that are presented to them. The issues were fundamentally caused by very different personalities and communication styles. And what I've found interesting was the Commission said incompatible personalities and communication styles does not necessarily constitute bullying. So we're not advocating harsh tone and being blunt to our co-workers and to our team, but the Commission said that on itself is not the grounds for bullying. So I think that's worthwhile. Just I thought some interesting things in there, Andrea, particularly given it was two cases over 2 different months that essentially fed the same problems and the same allegations and findings from it. So there we go. So another interesting one, we reported previously under essentially chain of responsibility, where that tragic accident happened a couple of years ago on the Eastern Freeway in Melbourne, where a truck driver fell asleep at the wheel. He was fatigued and I think drug affected from memory, and crashed into and killed 4 policemen on the Eastern Freeway. So most of you will be aware of that. So briefly, the company, Connect Logistics, was fined $2.3 million. The driver of that truck was convicted and sentenced to 15 years jail. So that's a very severe penalty, but you can't kill 4 policemen and think you're going to get off lightly, particularly if you're on drugs and fatigued. And the operations manager was sentenced to 3 years jail. So now the 4th case, which has only just been concluded, the scheduler within that business who was scheduling the drivers has been sentenced to 200 hours of unpaid community work, although the penalty could have been up to 5 years jail. Apparently, he was aware that the driver was somewhat fatigued. There's no mention of him being aware of the drugs, but he certainly was aware he was fatigued. And he planned to talk to the driver about his future there after the end of that 3-hour shift. And can you believe it? That's when the tragic accident happened, within a 3-hour shift, not even a full day shift. So that's chain of responsibility, and if you like, recklessness and how they're applying it, you can see it's quite real. So, yes, that was under the National Heavy Vehicle laws. I just saw a little question there. So correct. I just call that chain of responsibility, but technically it's the heavy vehicle national laws. Yep. There's been a minor amendment to the Victorian Incident Notification Regulations. Andrew, you may recall a couple of years ago, I investigated an accident as shown here in the photo, and a log came through the front window of a tree felling machine, which is an excavator. Essentially, they start their life as earth moving equipment. They get an attachment put onto them. The glass there, by the way, is armoured glass. It is not just plate glass, that's armoured glass, but the log is obviously powerful enough to come through. So the question is that a notifiable incident? The driver was not hurt. He could have been killed, but he was not even sustained a scratch. So he was extremely lucky. So this is part 2 of section 37 of the Act, notifiable incidents. I've called it near misses here, inverted commas, but this is where people could be in proximity to an immediate risk. And previously, the regulations only enforced that reporting if that near miss involved plant that required a license to operate it. Now, we didn't invent the regulation, so WorkSafe decided that's the wording they wanted at that time. So the latest amendment has now opened up the specification of plant, and it now includes virtually all plant, whether you need a license or not. So now it picks up earth moving equipment, things like excavators and bobcats. And I think you made the point, Andrea, still doesn't pick up equipment which isn't called plant, trucks, etc.
Correct. So, several years ago, we investigated an incident where a truck with a tipper tray struck the overhead power lines. And, but according to the definition, it wasn't defined as plant.
Yeah. Yes.
So it might still have other notifiable requirements under the electrical rules.
Yes.
But yeah, it's not plant. So just, other vehicles are still not plant. So it's not all encompassing, but it has expanded the definition there.
That's it. Thanks, Andrea. And just a reminder, our next public safety 2-day safety leadership course is coming up on 18th and 19th of June next month. We strongly recommend many of our listeners and friends and clients who haven't done this course, or you may have colleagues who would benefit from it. We really believe this is actually transformational, that people come in and go, oh my God, I've been in this industry for over 10 years. I did not understand that. I was doing risk assessments wrong. I didn't understand how the law worked on this. I didn't understand the role of SWIMs or JSAs. all of those things, and indeed how to build a strong safety culture is all covered. So give that some consideration. It's in our newsletter and on our website or just call or email and if you want to book in someone. So we're coming close to the end of our designated half hour, Andrea, and the two cases.
We did get one guess on this one. That Cheryl says she cannot imagine why it would be negligence, given there's likely an alternative to the ride-on mower, or the task could be reasonably be deferred.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. What I didn't give you is a bit of the detail of the case. A worker, this is in fact not a prosecution, but a claim for beyond workers' comp. So a person's already got workers' comp, but is now claiming permanent serious injury, and he tore his Achilles pushing the mower because he couldn't start it. Now, no one asked him to push the mower. The company didn't expect him to be pushing the mower, but the evidence showed that this had a faulty battery and had been flat a number of times, and the worker just said, "That's what I thought I should do to carry out my work." So it's not a perfect world, and we know that workers' comp favours workers because it's called workers' comp. It's not employers' compensation, it's workers' compensation. So you and I generally, as workers, we get the benefit under the court system and workers' comp system. That if you and I as humans, individuals, we may be careless at times, reasonable, as long as we're not recklessly careless, then the courts will tend to favour the worker, and that's what they've done here. And he was awarded $41,000 in addition, separate to the workers' comp that the person got, so for that torn Achilles. So the final question, and we'll wrap up, can we give a belated warning for failure to follow safety procedures? So as best as I know, Andrea, there is no regulations that say yes or no to that question. So it's largely what is your company policy and procedures as to what you do and how you do it. So firstly, did the managers follow the company procedures for either discipline or warning people or encouraging good, safe behaviour? If in doubt, I recommend you just check with a good employment practices specialist like our friends at FCW Law, and there's many other good firms as well that I'm sure that you're dealing with, that I'd recommend that if it's a sensitive case, you get good advice and check. I personally believe it's a moot point, because I don't think I want to measure just simply on 3 warnings and you're out. I think if people attended our safety leadership training, Andrew, we'd show them how to change behaviour long before we have to wait for 3 official warnings. And then I don't care whether it's a belated warning or not. Our mantra is every observed breach is intervened immediately. And of course, we have the 4-to-1 rule. We'd rather have not just negative, punitive feedback, but 4 positives should be the ratio for everyone working in the business. So that's my view of that question.
I think
a little
also,
bit woolly
Gary,
today.
The terrible truck accident where the scheduler intended to follow this up with the driver after the shift. I think this is a terrible reminder of why it's critical that if you have a safety concern, about somebody's behaviour, or their ability to comply with safety or rules, that, depending on the seriousness, if it is serious, you need to do something about it immediately.
Yeah, absolutely, Andrea. Good reminder. So thank you for that. So that brings us to the end of our May safety update. Thank you for joining us, and also for your support from all our good friends, clients, and readers of our newsletter. And we hope you have a great weekend coming up. We look forward to seeing you next month. And it's Friday, the 14th of June. Will be our next webinar. But if people have any questions in the meantime, or topics you'd like us to cover, or questions to answer, feel free to contact us. Thank you once again, Andrea, for your good support as always, and have a great weekend, everyone. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone, and thanks again for your participation in our webinar. It's always great to hear your comments and feedback as we go along.
Thanks.
And if anyone wanted any of those attachments, Gary referred to the a template for the board report, just send us an email if you're interested in that. Thanks. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Okay, bye.